Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza. It's a Paul World. We have a very special guest, global traveler. In fact, I've known of him and known him since all things 2013. The first time I ever went to FreedomFest, I met him. And I just want to welcome in Michael Cobb. Michael, welcome.
John Paul, nice to be with you today. And yeah, many years knowing each other and doing some great stuff. It was nice to catch up with you before the show and hear how things have evolved for you too. It's exciting. Yeah.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do? Because, there's a lot of people out there who will say, well, maybe I want to find an alternative place to go, but I know that you're going to tell people some things that they're not going to hear other places. So why don't you describe what you do?
Sure. Well, our business started 25 years ago. We started in Belize. Yeah, 25 years.
25. Wow.
Yeah, our 25th year of business coming up on 26th in October. We'll start our 26th year of business. So, we looked around. We said, there are a lot of North Americans, buying property in Belize. At the time, it was just Belize. And we said, you know what, we can do a better job of delivering what a North American consumer wants to own, right?
Right.
Outlets on all the walls, cabinets at the right height. I mean, no, it's simple stuff that, there's standards in the US, but down there, it's just whoever's building it builds it however they want. And so we brought a North American standard to the construction industry and the development industry. We started in Belize. We expanded into Nicaragua in the year 2000, Costa Rica, 2006, Panama, 2008. We're getting ready to expand right now into both El Salvador and Mexico. And again, it's this idea of serving a North American consumer where they want to be. So instead, a lot of developers, they go buy a piece of property. I'll pick on Belize. They buy a property in Belize, and then every single person they talk to, Belize is perfect for them, right? I mean,
right.
It has to be because that's what they have to sell. We actually approach the marketplace very different. We go out and we say, what are you looking for? Are you looking for Caribbean? Are you looking for Pacific? Do you like to dive and snorkel? Do you like to surf? Or the other climate types are like these tropical highlands that are like springtime all the time, right? 65 at night, 75 in the day, every day of the year, like in the foothills of the mountains, right? And that's what we have in Panama now. So we can go to the marketplace and ask people what they want, and then serve them with the product that fits their needs. So it's a very different business model, and it's been one that's been tremendously successful for us. And now we're in the next stage of growth and expansion into some new countries and some new markets. So yeah, great stuff going on.
Well, it's very exciting, and you're going to be at FreedomFest this year, and you're going to have a booth there, right?
Yeah.
So and maybe this is the time to say this, which is, given the number of years I've been in business, and I've been to so many different conferences, is that I always look for consistency and longevity and how that booth feels. I mean, and what I mean by that is that, since I've been going to Freedom Fest since 2013, every single one except last year, because obviously COVID didn't allow it.
Right.
But Michael and his team have been there year after year, always answering questions, never a hard sell. And never some weird, whacked out, crazy stuff. I mean, I can't even remember some of these things. Guys who were trying to. I mean, my favorite one was this guy who said, "Listen, I'll sell you a second passport." I mean, that was basically the pitch.
Yeah.
And you may ever even remember these guys, but you got to buy a really expensive condo on a Caribbean island that nobody goes to. Well, I know who goes there, but usually they're not good people.
Right.
And it's like 3.5 times what you would normally get, but you get a second passport. So, but Michael is not in that business. So if you're interested in finding out about going outside of the US and also the expat. So this is the other thing, is that I met a lot of people who would have the booth, and I'm going to take a breath in just a second, Michael, but who had the booth, but never actually did it. And Michael, you lived in Nicaragua for how long?
For 14 years. I moved there with my wife and 2-year-old daughter. It's funny because we bought the property in the year 2000. It's a giant piece of property. It's think about this for a second, John. It's 3.5 miles of Pacific Ocean beachfront, and it's a mile deep, and really took us about a year. Wow. I know you have a new book, Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes, right? It takes you 3 years to find out or whatever, right? I mean, I love that title, but it's so catchy. That's so catchy. It took us a year actually to figure out that we were building a town. Like it didn't really register early on. I mean, you think about a municipality. I mean, many little towns are 3.5 miles by a mile, right? I mean, maybe bigger, but that's a town. And so once we kind of understood what we were doing, we went out and hired city planners. We actually hired an urban planner out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, same ones that did Walt Disney Celebration and some other very big high profile communities that they built. Hey, we hired them to help us design a town, which they did. And so my wife and 2-year-old daughter, we moved to Nicaragua in 2002 for what we thought would be, I don't know, 2-3 years, right? That was sort of like, all right, can we go to Nicaragua for a couple of years? We need to, get the team. We need to get down there and hire the architects, engineers, accounting, get the contractors. And then, and about year 3, we'd hired a chief operating officer to run the business. So now it's, 2000, probably 6, maybe 4 years or 2.5 or 3.5, 4 years. I said, all right, what do you want to do, honey? Do you want to, and we had another little daughter that came along and I said, do you want to stay in Nicaragua? You want to go back to the States? Because, we kept our home and just rented it because we thought we'd be gone a few years. And it was, no, I like it here. Let's just stay longer. And we stayed longer, and longer was, 11 more years. We were there for a total of 14 years, loved it. And really understand what it means to be an expat. And you're right. A lot of people talk about this stuff and they're selling properties overseas, but they don't really know what it means to be an expat. And it's this experiential understanding that lets us as a company, many of our team members, by the way, are expats. You mentioned Rachel Jensen, meeting her in 2013.
Right.
When she was an intern. So that was her first year with our company. She was an intern. She's now our vice president of sales. She lived in Nicaragua for 2 years. She has now lived in Belize for the last 5 years. And many of our team members are expats. So we can actually bring people in and help them, kind of navigate what it means to move from North America to Central, South America, the Caribbean, and have that experience be mostly pleasant. Let's be honest. Nothing's ever all peaches and cream. Roses have thorns, right? And you mentioned being straight with people. We're very straight with people. I actually wrote a small little book, not like yours, but I wrote a small book, and it's morphed over the years, and we call it the Consumer Resource Guide, where we literally, we give them away at FreedomFest. So come by and we'll get you a copy. And we literally talk about the thorns as much as the roses, because if you, at least where the thorns are, you can pick the roses without getting all, cut up. So it's important to see both sides of it. And we like to present both sides of it. And and you know what, I'm sure we lose sales over it. I'm sure we do. But you know what, I'd rather lose sales to get people who are really, thinking clearly about what this means, so that when they come, they are really happy customers. Because in the end, 25 years, I speak, well, I used to speak live at a lot of conferences. Hopefully, knock on wood here, we're going to start speaking live again, right? I can walk into any conference, anytime, stand up in front of a room of, FreedomFest will be 2,000 people there. And I don't worry. I don't worry. It's not that we've done everything right for the last 25 years. We haven't, right? But we've made everything right when it wasn't. And so I don't ever fear walking into a room, meeting people, because I'm always happy to see the folks who are our customers and our shareholders. Right. It's been a great 25 years, and we're going to keep on that path, because it's a path that works.
And I'm going to go a little bit different direction. I had a friend of mine who got excited about moving to Uruguay, because Uruguay is the Switzerland of South America. And he goes down to Uruguay, and it's beautiful. I mean, I've never been there, but he sent back photos. And he goes in and he starts looking at buying properties. And of course, he goes in and he looks at furnished properties, which when somebody's going to move, they're going to take all the furniture with them. Right. And he ran into a few things. Let's just call them cultural shocks. Maybe you can address those. But like there's no central heating, and there's no outlets. Oh, and by the way, there's no closets. Right. And oh, by the way, there's and he came back and he said he was just shocked that people who had very nice houses didn't have things that the cheapest track house would never even think of not having. And he had this shock, and he goes, it may be Switzerland, but it's the South American Switzerland. It's not really Switzerland.
Yeah, it's not Switzerland. Maybe Switzerland, but it's not Switzerland, right? And it's funny because again, these are the kinds of cultural things that we in North America don't know. When we buy a house and we're looking at it, yes, we assume somebody's taking their couch and their dining room table. But I don't think any North American would imagine they were going to take the refrigerator, the stove, the hot water heaters. I mean, like literally anything you can unbolt from that house is gone, right? You're just like, whoa, what the heck, right? So, right. So there are those issues. Outlets. That's a big one, by the way. I remember, going into a bunch of condos, and it's still the case, and it's not as much anymore, but it's still, you can walk into a condominium or a home, and literally there'll be one outlet on the wall in the living room, and you'll see people plug 2 outlet strips in with extension cords running to 2 more outlet strips, extension cords to get around the room, right? So they can plug stuff in. This is nonsense because it doesn't take very much money. And that's why we got in the business. We said, look, to fix things like countertops being too high or too low, door handles all at a different height than a home, right? Putting an outlet on every wall,
right?
Just things like that. We said, you know what, we could do that for a few $1,000, couple grand, right? I mean, for the whole thing. And so if you're looking at a $200,000 property, it's 1%, but the quality of life that you get is way more than 1% for that $2,000 differential. But the other thing, there are some things that are much more serious. Those are cosmetic. You can run extension cords and outlet strips. You might blow some fuses, which you will, because they're not going to put a panel box in that'll carry that kind of load. But anyway, it is what it is. But things like plumbing, because plumbing actually, and the panel box too, by the way, that's a big one. Like, is the panel box big enough to service your North American electrical needs? Right? Ours are, right? But many people don't, because they, whatever, they put the cheapest thing in there, or if you're buying an old home, it wasn't upgraded. But the thing that I think, and this is a little gross, but I just always say it, if you run around Latin America, what you'll see is by every toilet, you'll see a little trash can that people put their poopy, toilet paper in, because you don't flush it. You don't flush toilet paper because the pipes are too small and it clogs up, right? And so, right. So, it's incredible. You go to these beautiful homes, right? And like, there's a little trash can with toilet paper sitting beside the toilet, right? That's normal. That's customary, and it's fine. I mean, there's no harm, no foul. But you know what? I want to flush mine, and I want everyone else to flush theirs, right? But you have to put in the right size pipes. So again, lots of things like that aren't obvious, right? That actually are maybe even more important. And then you get to the stuff that's like what I would call real serious. So anywhere along the Pacific coast, from Vancouver all the way to Alaska, down through Vancouver, California, right on down through Mexico, all the way to the bottom of Chile, you've got the fault lines. It's not the San Andreas because they're different faults, but just like California, you've got earthquakes along the Pacific coast of the Americas, right? And if you must absolutely make sure that the construction is first of all meeting the codes and meeting the standards, right, when you design it, which that's the easy part. But what's much harder is to make sure that the construction itself is following those standards, so that your home is actually, seismic standard, California seismic code. Most of the countries actually use the California seismic code because it's a great code, right? But you got to make sure. And then on the Caribbean side, right, in the Caribbean, not necessarily in the eastern part of South America, but in the Caribbean, and does it meet hurricane standards? Is it Cat 4, Cat 5 rated? And again, these are all pretty simple, easy things. And if you buy a house in Miami-Dade, right, it's going to meet hurricane codes. If you buy a house in California, it's going to meet earthquake codes. Not necessarily the case in Latin America. So again, now we're talking about what I would call the real stuff, right? The safety stuff. You probably want your panel box to work. You probably want to flush your toilet paper, but everybody wants to be able to sleep at night and know when the earthquake comes that the house is going to be just fine, or the hurricane comes. So, you have these sort of levels of things that are very important. And we actually address those in that consumer resource guide as well. Just getting people to start thinking a little differently, like, oh, I really got to pay attention to these things. Right. I don't have to pay attention to them in the U.S. And let's pick on Rand Paul for a minute. Look, someone like, people talk about freedom, right? And we want this freedom. We're going to the FreedomFest, libertarian, and right. And people love freedom. I love freedom. But the flip side of freedom is personal responsibility, right? It's two sides of the same coin. Freedom
Right.
on one side, personal responsibility on the other. The problem is that most North Americans, US and Canadians, have been lulled into a absolute false sense of security because the government agencies all over take all care of us. They make sure the building inspector looks at the plans. They make
Right.
sure that there's somebody inspecting this. Truth in advertising laws. I mean, just all these kinds of regulatory bodies that remove the need for personal responsibility. And so what we find, John Paul, this is the key. This is really what I hope when people read the Consumer Resource Guide,
Okay.
what I hope they take away from it is, holy smokes, I got to change how I think.
Right.
That's it, man, right there. Like, yeah, there's 15 questions. Yeah, there's examples, and those are all great. But if somebody changes how they think and say, you know what, I don't have any big brothers, no agencies looking out for me.
Right.
I got to look out for myself. And what that takes is it takes real humility, because we don't know what we don't know. Right. And we also need to forget what we think we know. Right. We come with these assumptions that there's going to be some building inspector that's watching. No,
Exactly.
it's not. Right. And so these, forgetting what we think we know and understanding that we don't know what we don't know means an approach of humility. And I've seen this over, 25 years. The folks who come to the region with real humility and ask for help and want to deal with professionals, whether it's, a reputable lawyer, a reputable realtor, someone who's actually licensed to sell real estate in that country, right? No, really.
Oh,
right?
yeah. No, I got it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so if people come in with those kinds of humble attitudes, we see much, much higher degrees of success, not just in the transaction, of course, but in the happiness that follows when they move into their home or condo and transition. So anyway, well, that was a long answer to that question. I'm sorry. I
think that's good, because it bubbled up in my head that there was I knew this guy Ken, and we'll leave his last name out. And Ken had, and this is the 1980s, and Ken had purchased a house in Los Gatos, California, one of the richest zip codes in the world, or at least in California.
Yeah.
And he bought this house, and it was a neat house, cool house. And it was kind of like this, but it was the property and how it was laid out. And if you remember the big earthquake that hits, with the World Series getting interrupted and everything. And what he discovered that he did not know about that house is that the original house was built in the 20s. And then they more than doubled the house in the late 40s, and they bolted this big giant front end to it, and it cracked where they had the two pieces together, and the front slid down the front of his property.
Wow.
And what he didn't have was what a lot of people in California don't have, is he didn't have earthquake insurance.
Okay.
And the inspector came out and said, well, I got to tell you, I'm going to red tag your property and condemn it, because this thing cracked right here. And he goes, but did they permit it when they first did it? Well, yeah, they did, but it was 1948 permits or whatever it was. Yeah. But there's no way to Humpty Dumpty can't get put back together. Goodness. And now, but the property was worth so much, and he had done just fine. But it literally, it literally in the late 80s soaked $1 million to put that back together again. And what they did was they built a different house, because they took that front end and they just tossed it away. And that was not built to that code. And he was very shocked. I mean, nice guy, but the house broke in two. So I've seen that happen, and you definitely don't want that to happen to you. So talk a little bit about, and I think this is an interesting circumstance, especially today. We've got a lot of tension in the air, lots of things going on. And, maybe you're at that point in time where financially it makes sense that you're looking to get someplace outside the US. And you shared something with me, which I think is really critical. Why is it important, if that sense of security, to actually have some place that you can go? Because we tend to be very somewhat arrogant and think, well, we take that US passport, we go get on a plane, we can go anywhere. However, maybe not. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, a good point. I want to kind of circle around on a few different topics that kind of fit into that. The idea as an American, right, or Canadian, right, we are arrogant. We can get on an airplane, we can fly to 100 countries around the world or whatever it is, and literally walk up to the immigration officer and they say, hey, welcome to Jamaica, welcome to, wherever, Uruguay or France or wherever it is, right? You don't need a visa. You just walk in. The thing is that what they stamp in your passport, welcome to, wherever, right? They stamp a tourist visa in your passport, and it's good for some period of time, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, whatever it is, right? But it's a tourist visa. It conveys the right to be there for some fairly short amount of time. And what that has done, again, we need to change how we think. It lulls us into this false sense of security that if stuff hits the fan, you know what? Stuff hits the fan, I'm getting out of here. Great, no problem. Get on an airplane and go somewhere. Problem is that, 60, 90 days later, whatever that tourist visa is, you got to leave because, you're a tourist. Bye-bye. Thanks for playing, right? You got to go home now. Right? But the whole point was you didn't want to go home. You wanted to leave, which you can do. The key is, how do you stay? And so one of the things that we have done, and you mentioned some of the folks selling passports in some of the Caribbean islands, and there is some shadiness to some of that stuff. Some of the programs are actually okay, and some of them are a little bit, whatever. We've helped many people over the years with second residencies, not really second citizenships. That requires a lawyer, and we're not lawyers. But what we do is we tend to work in countries where if you buy a piece of real estate, you can actually become a permanent resident in that country, which is nice because now you own a home somewhere. Let's pick on Panama for a minute. You buy a home in Panama, and you can become a permanent resident in Panama. So you can use it as a vacation property. You can go down whenever you want. But let's say in 10 years, you say, you know what, I really do want to retire to Panama, right? No problem. Go live there the rest of your life. You're a permanent resident of Panama. But if stuff hits the fan, right, and 3 years from now, and you're like, holy smokes, I got to get out of here. Well, move to Panama. You're a permanent resident. You can stay there the rest of your life for as long as you want. So what we do is we really help people through the ownership of real estate to obtain second residencies in some of the countries. Panama, Nicaragua, Belize are three big ones. One of the reasons we're looking at Mexico is they have a very good permanent residency program as well. Some of these programs actually lead to citizenship, which is kind of interesting. If people, there's the old saying is there's two ways to get citizenship in another country. There's the slow, cheap way and the fast, expensive way. So you can buy a passport in some of these countries and literally in a matter of several months, you're a citizen, right? Or you could live in Panama most of the year, learn Spanish, and you have 5 years to do it. And at the end of 5 years, you take a test on your Spanish, and it's not super hard. You got to be able to converse and become a citizen of Panama, right? We're actually looking at a project in the Azores right now, which is Portuguese. And wow. Yeah, because Portugal has a phenomenal program. It's called their Golden Visa. It's a residency program that over 5 years turns into citizenship. And so we're looking at helping folks there with a really cool project. Again, it's sort of out of our core business, which is the Americas. But because we run into a lot of people who want this second residency that might or might not lead to citizenship in the future, and a lot of folks want Europe, Portugal is one of the least expensive ways. It's one of the easiest ways to get a residency in Portugal, which really means once you have a residency in Portugal, if you say, you know what, I want to live in Paris, drink coffee and smoke cigarettes all day, no problem. You're an EU citizen, or you're an EU resident. Sorry, you're an EU resident. So go live in France, right? So there's some neat things about that one, but that's sort of an outlier to our business model. But in the end, I think you hit the nail on the head that we need, again, change how we think. Yes, we can leave, but how do we stay? In fact, that's what I'm speaking about on Thursday at FreedomFest. That's exactly what I'll be talking about, is this notion of getting a second residency overseas, right, as a way to protect the most important asset we have, which is us physically, right? It's us, right? Yeah. So.
Well, I like that, and just just so anybody, there are lots of different ways to go get second passports and everything. It's just that the some of these people that I've run into, not going to mention any names, when you tell me I have to pay 2.5 times the rate for a condo on an island, that you have to make 3 connections to get there, and ride a catamaran from somewhere. I'm telling you right now, that may be great if you want to disappear or something, right, but overpaying is not a good idea. That's just my take. And and I've seen people who think they're going to jump the line and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And all I can tell you is not a good idea, because those things always fall apart. Well, this time is just flying by. So Michael, so how would somebody get a hold of you? If, let's say for whatever reason, they disappoint us. And I mean, if you disappoint us, you can still get a hold of Michael. How do you do that? How do they find you on the web? How do they get to you?
Well, I assume you're going to put up some links, and we always like to know how people hear about us. So, the easiest way is info@ecidevelopment.com. You can put in the subject line, it's a Paul World or something, so we know that came from you. We always like to see, where, because here's the thing, when somebody comes from your program, we know generally how they're thinking, and we are able to then assign a property consultant or a residency consultant that's a good fit, because we really deal across the spectrum of all types of folks. We're not totally non-discriminatory, right? Now personally, I love FreedomFest. I've been coming since they started in whatever year, 2002. Something, whenever Mark started it, right? and I haven't made them all like you, but I've made most of them. So for me, this is philosophically a conference that I love. I am personally a libertarian, and I just love the notion of freedom, and it's one of the reasons I like working overseas, because there's a lot more freedom. It's a lot less regulated. It's a lot less bureaucracy. Again, this notion of taking responsibility, for what happens is critically important. But if we know they come from you, John Paul, what we'll do is we'll make sure we get them the consumer resource guide as a download. We'll be able to give them some other resources as well, country handbooks. If they're looking at any of we have, I think, 7 or 8 country handbooks, Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Argentina, Ecuador. I can't remember them all. Anyway, but we've got great, a lot. So we've got these great country handbooks, great resources. And then we have other resources about residencies overseas and just other things but if we know they come from you, we'll certainly turn them on to that stuff and give them access to it. So info@ecidevelopment.com. And then, you're kind of in, and we'll take great care of your folks. Yeah.
I love that. And so for those of you who have not signed up yet, you should do it. There's still time. There's hours. We're hours away. Because once you're less than a week, because a week is 168 hours. So once you're below that, I just start measuring hours. The big clock is ticking down. So July 21st to 24th at Rapid City, South Dakota. I'm going to give everybody directions, not from where, not from his expat places, but I'm saying if you're in the U.S., here's how you get to Rapid City, South Dakota. First off, you locate Interstate 90. If you cannot locate Interstate 90, go back to your 4th grade teacher and get a refund, because you should have learned how the interstate highway system works. Once you locate it, determine if you are east or west of Rapid City, South Dakota. If you are east of Rapid City, South Dakota, head west on Interstate 90. Go to the wide part in the road. 78,000 people call it home, and that would be Rapid City, South Dakota. If you go to, if you get to Mount Rushmore, you've gone too far. Turn around. Yep. If you're on the west side, because I know some of you could not twist this around, head east, go past Mount Rushmore, and then go to the white spot in the road, and it's going to be a great time. One of the things that I really love about Freedom Fest, Michael, and maybe you agree with me, is that it's not just meeting 1 or 2 people, but it's meeting how many different people, the variety of people. And who knew that several years ago I'd run into this guy, Michael Cobb. We started talking, met Rachel. She made enough of an impression in me that, even after all these years, still her name's stuck in my head, and it's great that her career has flourished and grown with your company. So talk about the kinds of people, and then we'll do a quick wrap up, but talk about the people you meet.
Well, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about at many of our conferences, and we host some of our own conferences as well, is this notion of community, right? And because community is foundational, and it's one of the reasons I mentioned at the very beginning, we went out and hired an urban planner to help us build Grand Pacifica. But there were a lot of lessons there. Sure, there was the exact, what we needed for Grand Pacifica, but the lessons we learned was this. So the big lesson, the big takeaway: people want community. People need community. And when we can build peer relationships that are meaningful and have conversations with people who we share general philosophical ideas, we don't have to agree on everything, but generally we can, share common philosophical foundational elements. We can create community. And I don't know about you, but let me tell you, right here where I live in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, I don't know of anyone I can go have a conversation about, Austrian economics with. I know of no one I could do that with. But yet when you go to Freedom Fest, you want to talk Austrian economics? No problem. You want to talk about the Anthem Film Festival? No problem. You want to talk about, what it means to be a libertarian? Great. You want to talk about freedom issues, right? I mean, all of these things are just on the table for discussion. And I find it powerfully wonderful and powerfully refreshing. And one of the things that we've seen because we do a lot of conferences like this, I would say that 3/4 of the conferences we speak at, 3/4 of the folks who become our property owners come from something similar to Freedom Fest. And so our communities that we've built tend to be communities where people can get together and talk about, the freedom types of things. And
excellent.
Yeah. So, coming to Freedom Fest, I highly encourage everyone to come out, because the community of people who are there will be, at one level, people you can make deep, significant connections with, and it's a lot of fun too. So, yeah.
Well, I just want to thank Michael Cobb. I have to tell you that when I saw that he agreed to do an interview, I was excited and wanted to make sure that we got this interview in and done, and we're going to get it up as soon as we possibly can. And I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why you should go swing by and talk to them at the booth. If you have watched at least 1 or a dozen, I'm going to be an expat. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to be I'm going to go do a gig economy somewhere else. I'm going to go do something like that. Before you get past that fantasy, because I know you're sitting there watching it on your laptop or on your phone or whatever, you want to go talk to somebody who's done it. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is genuinely nice people are hard to find in the development business. And Michael has stood the test of time. Only person I've interviewed who in fact is in your business is you. So genuinely nice people. And the third thing is that when you go and talk to him, here's what I think you really should bring those questions, even if you don't think that they're important, but bring those questions and ask those questions before you go making any kind of other decisions. Don't let them stay in your head, get them out of your head. So if those 3 reasons aren't enough, I don't know what is. And with that, I just want to thank Michael Cobb for coming on and spending some time with us. Go see him at Freedom Fest. I know I'm going to be there at Freedom Fest. Thank you, Michael.
Yep. See you in a few days, few hours. Yeah.